And I rise to speak to this bill again and follow on from some of our discussion last night. And I do need to note first how disappointed I was last night to see the extension of 26 weeks, that proposal voted down, which was, I think, a real shame for all the families in New Zealand who have access to paid parental leave. So to talk to part 2 specifically of this bill, the Green Party really support the vision of every single child thriving in this country, and that we believe in an investment in our children and our families, and we believe that that investment would pay off many-fold for many years for this country. And we are deeply concerned, along with many in this country, about the levels of inequality that we are now living with in New Zealand, that 285,000 children could be living in poverty, while the wealthiest
Point of order, Honourable Anne Tolley.
Mr Chair, look, I know we have had a wide-ranging debate, but I really do think that we're on part 2, and this speaker should really attempt to talk to the bill.
I'll hear the Honourable Trevor Miller.
Well, I actually listened to the last sentence that the member spoke before she was so rudely interrupted, and it was directly on this part of the bill. If the Deputy Leader of the House listened to the debate, she would make a fool of herself.
The member should not use a point of order to attack another member. I will order. So, I think the point is well made. I've been listening very carefully, and we are on the amendments to the Income Tax Act. That's part 2. But members are, and some discretion is given to draw an analogy and example, and I listened very carefully. I'm kind of reluctant to interrupt members, but if members don't want to debate the part 2, then it is inviting the House to determine whether or not it wants a closure. That's kind of the discipline around how this stuff works. All right, Jan Logie.
Mr Chair, and actually, as I was saying, to carry on exactly from what I was saying about our concern around the levels of inequality in this country and how the parental tax credit, which we are debating in part 2 of this bill, will directly feed into that inequality in this country, which for us is just a shame. And it is symbolic of the ideology of this government, where they will offer token lollies to people, and that will make a difference to some families, and I'm not underestimating that. $70 a week for middle income earning families in this country will make a difference, and that is why we're supporting this. However, it is also by purposefully denying this parental tax credit to beneficiaries, to people receiving ACC, to those receiving student allowances or pensions, it will actually increase inequality, because it's the group who is in the most need is getting nothing from this provision in the bill, and which is why we are putting forward an amendment to this bill that I hope others in this Parliament will support, to ensure that this extension to the parental tax credit will be available to every single family in New Zealand, because we care deeply about inequality. And I would also like to note in some of the discussion around this provision in the bill, in part 2 of the bill, that CPAG's, the Child Poverty Action Group's analysis of this, where they've noted that the government appears to have a blind spot when it comes to the needs of children and beneficiary families. And we agree with that, and we've heard that quite clearly from some of the interjections on the government side of the House last night and again today. And I do want to remind this House of some of the drivers for the need for people to require income support. And a primary driver for that is either a loss of employment, something people have no control over, or it may be disability and the barriers that we haven't brought down, those barriers to employment for people with disabilities, and it can be domestic violence, something that we are supposedly all together on fighting in this House. Mr Chair. Mr Chair, thank you, Mr Chair. So to discriminate against those families, to deny them this extra money to be able to help cope in those early days after the birth of a child, to us doesn't seem consistent with the values of an inclusive society. And I would also note that Child Poverty Action Group have looked at this analysis, and they've also said that while it looks as if families are going to be getting extra money, and it will increase on an annual terms for those families who are able to get it, from basically $2,200, they'll now get about $2,200 a year from this provision, up from $1,200. So it's an extra $1,000 for those families in total to cope with those kind of extra financial costs of a new baby. But that they are urging the government, as well as us, to extend those payments to families who are currently excluded. Because, as in the words of Susan St John, it's unfair that the most needy new mothers and their newborns will get no help from these measures that are funded by the taxpayer. And for me, that's one of the things to remember, is that our tax money is our collective expression of our values as a country. And it's a way of, together, we have so much more resource. And we can make a huge difference in the lives of these families at virtually no individual cost to us, actually, because when it all comes together, it's a tiny amount from me, tiny amount from you, that would make such a huge difference. And I really believe New Zealanders do want children and babies in beneficiary families, those who are leaving violent relationships, those with disabilities, those who have lost their jobs, to have as good a start as anyone else. And that's what's in front of this House today, is the opportunity to give kids the best chance in every family, or entrench inequality. And I am really hoping that this House will reflect on its values, reflect on the foundations of this country, and come up with a solution that says, yes, we believe every child deserves to thrive. That no, we do not support entrenching and building inequality in this country. And I would also like to just also make one note that this provision of the bill has been specifically noted by the government as part of its families package of $500 million, which sounds like, you know, quite a lot and significant investment. But it is worth noting to the country that this is over 4 years. So that's actually only $125 million a year, and this provision is actually only an increase of $15 million a year, I've been told. So when we're thinking about our relative value and how much, 13, thank you, Mr Mallard, then how much this government is really valuing families and children and wanting to support them, and also remind them that $1 billion a year is now being spent on servicing the interest on the debt that this country, this government got us into because they chose to cut taxes for the wealthiest in this country. Now, to me, that needs to be said. I want to support and give the government affirmation for good initiatives, and we will do that at every opportunity. But it does need to be put in context, and the question needs to be asked, does this fundamentally reflect our values? Will this deliver on a country where every single child has the ability to thrive, and we are giving all our weight to that vision? And sadly, while we will be supporting this because it's something, unless this House extends it to every single family, and particularly beneficiary families, I do not believe this initiative delivers on what our children deserve.
Tracy Martin.
I'll just take a short call on part two, and I actually